Hi guys, welcome back to Reserved Investments on YouTube. Before I begin, I want to send out a heartfelt thanks to Pat the NES Punk and Ian, who featured this channel and myself in a segment that they produced on their particular YouTube channel entitled Are Great at Video Games a Horrible Investment? If you haven't already watched that segment, please do. It aired on December 7th, 2019. So I want to give a heartfelt round of thanks to both Pat and Ian, because after that video premiered, I ended up with an influx of new viewers and subscribers to the point where it literally almost doubled the original subscriber account that I had on this channel before that segment premiered on their show. So I am very grateful for that. For those of you that are new to this channel, I welcome you and I thank you for subscribing. I also thank you for viewing this content, whether you love it or loathe it. So I do appreciate the fact that you're here. Now, in this video, what I want to do is, back on December 5th, 2019, I started soliciting questions for an official question and answer session. I'm going to start answering your questions in this particular video. This is going to have to be done in multiple videos, though, because I got asked a lot of in-depth questions. So I'm going to start. We're going to get right into this. And in a couple of days or a couple of weeks, you will see part 2 and possibly part 3 of this segment air. So I just want to make sure that you guys are aware. I got asked a lot of in-depth questions that are going to take some time to answer. So here we go. When do you think the retro game bubble will pop? I want to buy games for a quarter like the old times. Well, if you really want to buy some cheap vintage video games, look at the pre-Nintendo systems. Atari, Intellivision, ColecoVision, Commodore, Apple Computer. A lot of those games and systems are selling at an extreme discount right now because the generations that grew up with them have moved on. And by the way, guys, the same thing will eventually happen with Nintendo, Super Nintendo, Sega Genesis, TurboGrafx-16, Neo Geo, Sega Saturn, Sega Dreamcast, and the like. And prices will eventually fall. Right now, the market for a lot of vintage games, especially Nintendo or later items, is in a speculative bubble thanks to the rise of video game grading and a lot of speculators and investors coming into the market. I've said this before. I truly believe at present time, 60% of the people that are buying graded video games are speculators. The market does not have a significant amount of authentic collectors in it as of yet. Are people interested in it? Yes, it's not going away. I don't want you to ever think that video game collecting or video game grading is going away. It's not. Whether you love to hear that or hate me for saying it, it's the truth. It's here to stay. You just have to understand how to analyze that market as such. I would not be buying at these high prices right now. I would be selling at them, and full disclosure, I am selling into this market. So we're going to go on to the next question. Fantastic channel, man. So I have a question for you. What are your thoughts on the perceived value of collector's editions of games? Also, do you have any thoughts on the GameCube market? It seems GameCube and even certain Wii games are stupidly high in price right now. Well, this is what you got to understand. Collector's editions are mass-produced, scarce products. They will never have organic collectability. You go to your GameStop and you were able to pre-order The Legend of Zelda Link's Awakening, the Dreamer Edition. If you can sell this for $20 or $30 more than what you paid for it after all your eBay and PayPal fees, by all means, sell it to the person who wants to own it. But understand, this will never have organic collectability. Neither will a limited run game, neither will an amiibo. Too many people are buying and hoarding this stuff, thinking it's going to have value long term. And I know what you're going to say to me, Sean, you don't understand. They only made several thousand copies of certain limited run games or certain items that are being sold by some of these manufacturers. It doesn't matter, guys. It doesn't have organic collectability. You cannot manufacture collectible demand over the long term. It has to come from organic growth. What I mean was, back in the day when stadium events came out, or when Nintendo released the Nintendo World Championships gold and gray cartridges, nobody thought those items would become valuable today in the future. Well, guess what? Because of that, a lot of those items were sold for pennies on the dollar. Like, we look back today and we see an item like stadium events that once sold for like $5 at Funko Land. Well, nobody really wanted it. Back then, there was a couple of kooks going after that game, myself included. But looking forward, nobody ever thought that that $5 game would sell for $10,000 or $12,000. Well, everybody thinks that an item like this, or an Amiibo or a Funko Pop, is going to be rare down the line. So they're all buying it, they're hoarding it, and they're saving it in mint factory sealed condition, thinking it's going to be worth money. Collecting doesn't work that way. It's organic. It cannot be mass produced. You have to understand that going in. I did a lot of videos on that. I'm not going to talk any more to that comment. I just want you to know, be very careful buying that stuff for long-term investment. That stuff is made for short-term speculative flips. That's all it's good for. Next, do you have any thoughts on the GameCube market? GameCube market, in my opinion, is the last great vintage Nintendo system. After the GameCube came out, a lot of people were starting to become aware that vintage video games could be worth money. So when the Wii came out, a lot of people started storing and hoarding factory sealed Wii games. That's why you're more than likely than ever to see a lot of collectors that have multiple copies of Super Mario Galaxy or Legend of Zelda Twilight Princess or Super Paper Mario for the Nintendo Wii, all factory sealed sitting on a shelf. Be very careful if you're investing in those items. I will tell you what Nintendo is doing right now is they're re-releasing a lot of their old properties. For instance, Metroid Prime Trilogy is a great game for the Nintendo Wii. It's rumored to be in the works for the Nintendo Switch. So this is going to be the market going forward. A lot of you people that are paying a premium for some of this stuff, you have to understand if it's a modern era game, it's probably going to get reprinted and re-released in another form sometime in the future. So be very cognizant of that. If you don't believe me, look at the spectacular BioShock collection. Look at the Master Chief collection if you're a Halo lover. Look at what Nintendo's doing with a lot of the Zelda games. Zelda Twilight Princess first premiered on the GameCube. Then it had a version right away on the Nintendo Wii. Then it was re-released on the Wii U. Well, what version are you collecting for financial gain? Tell me. Because none of them are ever going to have any type of appeal that an original factory sealed copy of The Legend of Zelda from 1987 does. You see the difference? The market has changed and transformed tremendously. Next question. Could you possibly talk about collecting watches, whether antique or more modern watches? Yes, I am a Rolex enthusiast. I didn't put out a lot of videos on that particular topic because I got worried when I first started this channel with some of the discussions that I had in some of my earlier videos. If I started releasing videos on Rolex or classic car collecting or high-end luxury good collecting, I thought that people would take offense to the fact that I was releasing those type of videos, call me an elitist, and pretty much unsubscribe from the channel or not watch. So I was very cautious on what videos I released at the beginning when this channel was first formulated. If you look at some of my more recent topics though, I do talk about fine art, I do talk about Hermes Birkin bags and the like. There will be more videos coming on Rolex and high-end watches, as well as classic car collecting and the like. Just be patient. Next question. What mainstream item can you buy in a store today that you think will be collectible in 20 years? This is a major problem on a lot of the questions that I get, not only on this channel, but for the articles that I write through Antiques and Auction News. Please hear me out on this. There's only two ways to make it in the antiques and collectibles trade. Now, to be fair, I understand. If you want to collect something, you have a passion for it. Like there's a lot of items sitting behind me that I have a passion for. I don't mind paying the price and understanding that I may lose money on some of those items in the long run because as a collector, I have a passion for them. However, if you want to be a smart financial investor in the antiques and collectibles trade, you must understand that there's only two ways to make money. Short-term flips through short-term speculation, meaning an item like the newest Amiibo hits store shelves and they automatically hold back production on that item. Well, if you buy it for $15, $16 and you flip it on eBay for $20, $30, $40 after all eBay fees, PayPal fees, and shipping, and you're able to sell it to a Timmy or a Poindexter out there who doesn't understand how these markets work because they don't watch my channel, by all means, take advantage of that particular scenario. The only other way that you make money in the antiques and collectibles trade is through long-term investment. meaning you have to go after sophisticated markets like coins, currency, artwork, historical documents, collectible first edition books, antique furniture, antique glass, art glass, porcelain, items that have a decent track record of appreciation. You notice, I never ever recommend that people put significant amounts of money in vintage toys, vintage comic books, vintage video games for the long term. Reason being, a lot of those items are in linear speculative markets. You have to be cognizant of that. So to answer your question, I never ever recommend anybody go to a toy store or a Walmart or a Target and try to guess what type of items are going to be collected in 20 or 30 years. First of all, in the modern era of mass-produced items, it is impossible to decipher what items are going to be collected in 20 to 30 years that are currently on store shelves. Because 9 chances out of 10, it's the item you didn't suspect. For instance, let me use this as an example. If we went back to the 1980s, Rubik's Cube was popular. Cabbage Patch dolls were popular. If you would have bought into both those items, kept them sealed, and took them back to today, the future, 2019, those items are almost worthless, even in factory sealed condition, on the secondary market when you factor in the cost of inflation and the opportunity cost of tying up your money in an item like that. Back in the 1980s, people were going nuts for Rubik's Cube and Cabbage Patch dolls. You have to look at everything from the perspective of relevance. And that's what a lot of speculators don't do. Again, long-term speculation in the collectibles market never works. It never works out. There's very few cases after the 1980s and 1990s where that has worked and will work going forward. Be very careful with that mindset. Number 2, what do you think the market will be like for loose cartridge games in the next 5 to 10 years and beyond? Do you think prices will drop or stay the same or increase? Depends on what we mean by cartridge-based games. If we're talking stadium events, Little Samson, Nintendo World Championships, Gold and Gray cartridges, the market for those items could potentially go up. I mean, those items are fairly scarce when we talk about mass-produced collectibles. If you're talking about your standard copy of The Legend of Zelda from 1987, or Contra, or Super C, or Castlevania, or Kung Fu, or Super Mario Bros. 2 that's in cartridge form, most likely the prices are going to collapse. They're going to drop even lower. They're always going to have some value, but they will continue to drop because most of the speculators and investors coming into the market, they're going after near mint complete in box games or factory sealed vintage games. So that's something that you got to understand. It's a good time if you want to buy just a cartridge-only set of common Nintendo games, games that you love and want to play. You're probably going to be able to get them at pretty much a discount compared to the peak that we experienced back in 2015 and 2016. So rejoice in that regard. I really think those items aren't going to hold value long term though, so be very careful. Thoughts on the vintage Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles market? Be very careful if you're going into the vintage toy market with an investor mindset. A lot of vintage toys are prone to deterioration just due to the way that they were cheaply made. For instance, Star Wars figures from the 1980s were not meant to be kept factory sealed for the long term, even if they're graded or not. That's why you see so many discolored bubbles and also cracking and damage to the card just through holding the item for the long term in factory sealed condition. These were children's toys that retailed on shelves for $2 to $3. They were meant to be ripped open and played with, guys. They were not meant to be encased in plastic and kept for the long term. Be very careful if you are engaging in any of those markets, just like the sneaker market. I said this before. If you have a pair of Nike Air Jordans, I was corrected by that in one of the comments on the videos I did. Nike Air Jordans, if you have a set of shoes from the 1990s, that particular item is prone to discoloration, deterioration, and material breakdown. It was not meant to be stored long-term as a collectible for 10, 20, 30 years. Yes, people do it. You have to be very studious to understand that the items you're holding at any time can become worthless or less valuable just due to the fact that they're sitting on a shelf and aging. I don't like to invest in items like that. I like coins, currency, artwork, collectible documents, collectible first edition books, because they're safeguards to protect those items for the long term. You have to understand that. A silver coin or a gold coin, the worst thing that can happen to it once it's third-party graded, if you store it properly, the worst thing that could ever happen to it, and this is a very, very slight provenance of this happening, the coin could possibly tone and become an uglier coin than what it is in present day. But there's products out there that you can buy that prevent that from happening. So I like items where I can analyze the risk long term. And vintage toys and vintage sneakers, items like that, don't give me the same comfort level as coins, currency, artwork, items of that nature. So I hope that answers your question. Do you have any interest in the vintage guitar market? The answer is, personally, I don't, but I do follow it because I have clients through the consulting end of the business that I run in the antiques and collectibles trade who will contact me and they'll want to spend $50,000 on a vintage guitar, and they'll tell me, hey, I want you to analyze the market for me. What do you think of the market as a whole? I tell them, I'm going to just give you the same advice I give somebody that's paying me $50 to $100 an hour on this channel for free. The market is very esoteric. You have to understand it is a limited market. Not everybody is going out looking to buy a vintage Gibson guitar. You have to understand that going in. So if you're going to invest in that market, you really have to know what you're doing. You have to really know what you want to buy. You have to understand the dynamics of the market because it operates a little bit different than going out and buying vintage Magic the Gathering cards or Pokemon cards or video games or even coins and currency on that matter. So I don't recommend the average person get involved in that market for that reason. It's an esoteric market. I'm going to be doing more videos coming up on this channel that are devoted to more esoteric collectibles, items that you wouldn't expect people are collecting and buying in mass and also investing in. So that should be an interesting topic for discussion. Next, thoughts on the vinyl record market. I do like vinyl records. I am really not a collector of vinyl records. I consider myself more of a connoisseur, meaning I like the sound of vintage vinyl and modern age vinyl. So I'm more likely to buy a Nine Inch Nails album or an Enya album or a Muse album or a Jenny Lewis album on vinyl than any other format because number one, I have a physical copy of the item in question, and number two, when I go to play it, it sounds a lot better than a digital remaster of that same particular song or album. So I do like the vinyl record market a lot. I'll go into that in depth on another video that I have coming up. Paying record prices for sealed retro video games. Is this primarily speculators, or do you think there are actual collectors who want to hold on to them? It's both. Right now, 60% of the market, in my opinion, is driven by speculators. Be very careful if you are buying these items at present time. We don't know how many exist in the market as a whole. Wada Games has only been around for 2.5 years now, and we don't know how many copies of, say, Kid Icarus factory sealed are sitting out there ungraded, along with copies of Mike Tyson's Punch-Out, or The Legend of Zelda, or Zelda 2. You get my point? People aren't rushing to send these games into Wada Games at present time. There's a lot of collectors out there that I speak to on a weekly basis who tell me, you know, I'm sitting on 5 copies of The Legend of Zelda that are factory sealed from 1987. Here's a picture. I'm sending you a picture of my collection so you can see firsthand. And I'm really not in a rush to get them graded at present time because I wonder how many copies are out there of this item. Be very careful. There's a lot of unknowns in that market. You know, guys, I've said this before. A smart investor doesn't look at how much money he's going to make. He looks at the risk versus reward of the money he has invested or potentially invested in a lot of these markets. So if you want to go out there and you want to spend $5,000 on a graded factory sealed copy of The Legend of Zelda, you got to ask yourself, well, what if the market drops where that game's only worth $3,000? Am I comfortable with that? On the other side of the equation, you got to ask yourself, well, of course I would be comfortable if I paid $5,000 for that game and it went up to $8,000. But there's really no set formula for how this stuff works. So you are taking an increased risk, in my opinion, when you buy an item that is under the guise or under the siege of a speculative bubble. So be very careful in those markets. You know, look what's happening right now in the vintage Magic the Gathering market for reserve list cards. Prices are falling exponentially. Why is that happening? Well, I'm sorry, I'm not going to answer it here because I have another video planned on that particular topic coming up. So you will learn more about that soon. Just stay focused. Next, will retro games eventually go the way of the dodo bird? The answer is no. Video game collecting, whether you love it or loathe it, is here to stay. Video game grading is here to stay. I'm sorry, guys. I think I've already said that in this video. It's not going away. It's just going to change and evolve, just like coin grading and coin collecting did, or if we look at paper money collecting and grading, how that market changed, or if you want another example, how right now it's acceptable to purchase, buy, and sell graded Magic the Gathering cards or graded Pokemon cards, when 5-10 years ago, there really wasn't that much interest in a lot of these items if they were third-party graded. Grading in those markets is here to stay. There's nothing you can do about it. You can complain about it all you want. It's not going to change the market as it is. I would love to hear your take on the Disney VHS tape, which people go bananas over. What this person is referring to, and this is going to be the last question because we're approaching 25 minutes, but I do want to devote some time to this. If you look on certain websites, there's a lot of clickbait articles that claim vintage Disney VHS movies from the 1980s and even the 1990s are worth a lot of money. Some of these websites even refer to them as Black Diamond editions because the insignia on the VHS case itself is in the form of a black diamond. Well, when you do research on these items, you got to understand that this is all clickbait. What they're quoting in these particular videos and articles that are appearing online are asking prices. Remember, guys, anybody can ask anything they want for an item. There's listings on eBay right now for the US edition of the Mega Yarn Yoshi Amiibo where people are asking $10,000 for that particular item. It doesn't mean a Mega Yarn Yoshi is worth $10,000. In fact, I just sold one through my Electro Games account for $125 and I paid the shipping. So you have to understand, anybody can ask what they want for items. Now, when you search eBay, if you search by sold and completed listings, that gives you a picture of what items are selling for, but you have to be careful because anybody that has 2 eBay accounts can manipulate the market. Let me use this as an example. Let's say I want to get you to believe that a VHS Disney movie is selling for $5,000. All I got to do is list it on my one account and use my other account to buy it and then put in a final value credit fee for that particular item. Well, the way eBay works is even if I do that, they don't remove the original listing. So if you're searching completed listings, you'll see that that particular Disney VHS movie sold for $5,000. So be very careful the way that you analyze the market. I had a guy come to me several years ago who found a box of Disney VHS movies at a yard sale, and he paid like $10 a piece for them. And he thought he hit the lottery, man. He thought he was going to sell each one for hundreds or thousands of dollars. Well, he honestly took a loss on them when he listed them in eBay because on average, the movies sold for between $3 and $5 a piece. So there's very few movies that were made by Disney in the 80s and 90s that are worth money in VHS format. I'm sorry to disappoint you. That concludes segment 1 of this Q&A. I hope you found my answers informative. If there's anything else you want to know, let me know in the comment section. And as always, please consider subscribing. I value your feedback. And please let me know what upcoming topics you want me to discuss. I have a lot of topics in the pipeline, but I also want to hear your thoughts. Thank you, and good night.